PSAT and MSQT, PSAT and MSQT score report. That's if you have a son or daughter that's in the 10th or 11th grade. And then under the sample score report for PSAT 8-9 understanding, PSAT 8-9 parent tutorial if you have a child in the 8th or 9th grade. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you all for coming. And this is Parent Coffee that we're going to talk about understanding the PSAT, next steps. We're pleased to be joined by Christina Brownell, who is from Revolution Prep, who is our academic tutor. So she works very closely with our school for students as they're looking, and parents and families as they're looking to arrange academic tutoring, test prep options. We do also offer test prep like courses and also practice tests. So some of you may have had a child who took the practice test in October. We also do practice tests in the second semester. So we work closely with Revolution Prep to offer these things. So there's a couple of main points we're going to talk about today. So first thing, yes, students, as you know, the students are going to get their scores next week. So there's a lot, I know a lot of anticipation about that. These are the kind of main areas that we will cover today, on how to understand the PSAT score, deciding between ACT and SAT. I know that's a question that we get a lot, well, should my child take the SAT, ACT? How do you choose? Preparation options, and then Revolution can also talk about some preparation options that they offer, and then the next steps. So quick quiz, I know 8 o'clock in the morning, a little quiz for you all. So this is a little true and false. Only juniors are eligible for National Merit Scholarship consideration. Is that a true or false statement? False. It's a true statement. So yeah, juniors, so even though we do have 10th graders taking the PSAT, they do have to sit for it in the junior year in order to be eligible for National Merit Scholarship consideration. Another question, the National Merit semifinalist score is different for each state, true or false? True. That's right, that's also true. So the indexes went next, later this year, in actually August, before the school year starts, each school will be notified if they've gotten, if they have a student who's qualified based on their junior year PSAT score. And the indexes vary per state. I would say for the state of Florida, typically in the last couple of years, semifinalists have had scores somewhere in the 215, 216, 217 range. Other states, like the state I used to work in, New Jersey, it's more likely in somewhere in the 220 range. But again, it varies per state. Then here's another question. PSAT scores are the sole determiners of the National Merit Scholarships. Actually, that's not true. So you do have to meet a certain score threshold to be considered, but that's only step one. When someone applies for, when it is designated a National Merit semifinalist, that means that based on their score index, that they have earned semifinalist designation, they actually have to apply for the National Merit Scholarship. So that's something, last year we had, OCAL had 5 students who got semifinalist designation. So each of those students had to submit a formal application, very much like a college application, to apply for the National Merit Scholarship. And then last question, my PSAT score is a measure of my intelligence. False. Yes, absolutely, it's false. So yeah, standardized tests are not a measure of a student's intelligence. They measure certain things, but not the totality of someone's intelligence. So PSAT scores, these are kind of the bullet points we're going to cover: understanding PSAT scores, deciding between ACT, SAT, your preparation options, next steps. So PSAT score report. So the test if you have an 8th or 9th grade student, they took what's called the PSAT 8-9. When the College Board redesigned the SAT back in 2016, that meant all of the preparation tests for the SAT were also redesigned in the format of the new SAT. So the PSAT 8-9, anyone had a middle school student back in like maybe before 2016, they may have taken a test called Ready Step that used to be a middle school assessment that the College Board used to offer for middle school students. So that went away, and then the PSAT 8-9 is what replaced it. So the PSAT, the scoring is a little different. So if you look at the tutorial that, so for the PSAT 8-9, it's a scoring scale of 1320, actually, sorry. The PSAT scoring is 240 to 1440. The students are two sections, evidence-based reading and math. They also, so it's very similar to the structure of the actual SAT, but the scoring system is a little different between the PSAT 8-9 and PSAT NMSQT. So the sections, reading test, the students took a writing test. They took two math sections. One of the math sections was with a calculator. One of the math sections was without a calculator. So they scored based on their scores. Next week when they access their scores. So just a point, make sure that your child has their College Board account. If they were an 8th or 9th grader, last in September, myself and Ms. Fields met with each of the English classes in the 8th grade, and we established their College Board accounts. So if they don't remember, have them come and see me. I'm happy to help them retrieve the information, but they all have a College Board account. Students in grades 9 through 11 also have College Board accounts. So they will need to have those accounts accessible in order to access the scores. So if you were have an 8th or 9th grade student, so next week when they log into their College Board account, they will get something similar to this. So obviously it will be personalized to have their information, but it will have their score summary, exactly what they got, their percentile. So something to pay attention to is percentile. They'll show them you out of students nationwide who took this test, you scored in the 75th, 80th, 90th percentile, but depending on how they did. Also, it'll show their score percentiles for the two sections, the evidence-based reading and the math. Also, the sub-scores, like on their sub-scores on reading, sub-scores on math, sub-scores on writing and language. So look here, I know it's easy to kind of look at the score and not look at everything else, but very carefully look at this report next week when your child logs into their College Board account. And then for the PSAT, it's going to be a very similar report, just like this. It'll have their name and their specific contact information. Also, the difference, the scoring scale for the PSAT and NMSQT is 320 to 1520. They'll get, but again, very similar information. They'll get a percentile, their scores on each section, sub-scores on certain tests, the reading test, writing, language, and math test. Also, the difference with this report, as I mentioned with the national merit, they will get a national merit index. So this is the index which is used particularly for a junior if they are qualifying for national merit scholarship. So this index is something you want to pay attention to, particularly if you have juniors, because that will be the index that will be used as part of the consideration for national merit eligibility.
Mrs. Simpson, what was the index for last year?
So last year was 217, 218. So. Okay, and then the other piece to look at, especially for the PSAT for 10th, 11th graders, you will actually get an answer key. So this is the answer key. This will be the answer key that the answers that your child responded to, the questions. So it will give you the degree of the question. Was that considered easy, medium, or hard question? But this is the exact answer key. Along with that, we will also distribute the booklets. We still have the actual booklets that kids took, that the kids use for their test. So those will be distributed also. So they will get the booklet most likely by Friday. I'll probably distribute those out on Friday. But if not, they'll definitely they should come by and get them on next week during exams. But they'll get the PSAT 8-9 booklet or the PSAT NMSQT booklet. So they'll have this. They will also have their answer sheet so they can go through each of the questions and see exactly how they responded and use that as part of kind of preparing for next steps. Also, the score summaries also give you some analysis based on your scores. here are the things that we would recommend for you in terms of getting, if you're, depending on where you are, if you're a 10th or 11th grade student, if you're an 11th grade student getting ready to take actual testing in the second semester, here are the things that you want to focus on. For an 8th or 9th grade student, here are the things that you could focus on. So this is just going to sample report, and then just and then suggestions. These are the suggestions that they give you in the score report. And also the other thing that your score report will tell you in terms of College Board readiness benchmarks. So these are benchmarks that the College Board sets that kind of indicate student readiness for college. So they kind of color code them in red, yellow, green. So students obviously in the green, that they're meeting those benchmarks. Yellow means the students are approaching or very close to the benchmark. Red, that means that students might be an area that they need to focus on. So if it's an area in math or an area in reading, that's something that they're identifying so that for future study that the student can focus on. Yeah. So we went through scoring for each of these. And then again, this is kind of the selection index. So there's three tiers. Well, two tiers of recognition in the National Merit Program. So this kind of gives you a regional breakdown. So usually for Florida, as you can see, it's in that 250, as I said, 215 to 17. It was last year was a little bit higher, 217 to 218. States like Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey typically have higher indexes. Normally for a semifinalist, their scoring is in the 99th percentile of their state. Again, for Florida last year, that meant around 217, 18. For a commended student, that usually that scoring is in the top 4%. So last year commendeds were somewhere like in the low 200s, like around 205 or higher. So last year was a little higher, but 210. So this kind of just gives you a range of, for this program, kind of the testing criteria that a student would need to meet. And again, it's going to range particularly based on the state where you live. And then, so yeah, I mentioned like the kind of the parts, if someone is a National Merit finalist, what they need to, the things that they need to do, submit an actual application. So this is kind of the section that I mentioned before that you want to focus on with additional recommendations. So this is going to be part, as I said, this is again part of the score report. So looking past just the actual score, but looking at the recommendations. So this is a student who has in the yellow, so that means that they're approaching the benchmarks, and this is giving them kind of ways to how you can improve your skills. What are things that they are suggesting in terms of improvement of skills? Is it, do you need to maybe focus on doing on this particular skill? Focus on maybe a little bit more reading, more independent reading. What are ways that you can improve your sub-scores in each of these areas? And then we talked about the questions. So again, this is going to be part of the score report. So you want to certainly look at this because this is the actual answer key from based on your students' answers. So a common question for both the SAT and ACT, do you lose points if you respond correctly? In both cases on the SAT and ACT, you actually do not get penalized for guessing. So they only score your correct responses. So if a student guessed and they responding correctly, those points are not deducted. So it does, in this case, it does help to make a guess when you're testing. So another element of this is when students take a College Board assessment, PSAT, ACT, they also get access to a program called Khan Academy. Is anyone familiar with Khan Academy? Yep. So Khan Academy, so Saul Khan, who actually had a chance to, in 2015, he was a keynote speaker at a conference I was at. So Saul Khan established a partnership a couple of years ago with the College Board to provide free online test prep to students. So the way it works is whenever someone takes a College Board assessment like the PSAT 8-9 or the PSAT NMSQT, what happens is after they get their scores, they are able to create a Khan Academy account Once they've done that, they can you can link your College Board scores, your PSAT scores to Khan Academy, and then based on the Khan Academy will analyze your scores, and then they will set up an individual test prep plan. So when you log into a Khan Academy account, you are able to set up a test prep program for individualized online test prep program. Students also have access to practice tests, so you can do sample practice tests. This is something we encourage students to do. Is let's say if they're preparing for a test to take a SAT in March or May, what they could do is then set up a test prep schedule. So let's say if someone was aiming for the March test, then they could start in mid-January. So like every couple days, let's say they set a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. So I'm gonna set aside these hours during the day to do test prep. And then maybe every 2 weeks, do a practice test. So every Saturday, every two Saturdays, do a practice test, and then follow that schedule all the way up to the test date in March. So students have the ability to do that. They have the ability to access the programs on Khan Academy to prove their scores. And when the students get their their test results back next week, there will be accompanying instructions. There's instructions in here about how to set up your Khan Academy access and link the scores with Khan Academy. Okay. All right. SAT, ACT. So, does anyone want to take a guess what the key differences are between the two? Okay, so both of them are national organizations, College Board, ACT. The ACT, if anyone's familiar with the Iowa test, ACT was founded in the Midwest. Its office is in the Midwest. The SAT is more has offices on the East Coast, but the old kind of stereotype that ACT is only a Midwest test really doesn't apply, or the SAT is only an East Coast based test. That doesn't really apply. They both are I would say from what I've seen at Oak Hall and also my previous school, that pretty much school students take both in terms of there's not one test that's dominant versus the other. So we encourage students to choose the test that they feel that they will be most successful at. We do offer opportunities for students to take practice tests in both. So Revolution, what they will do each year is that we will do a practice session of both SAT and ACT. So back in October, on the day we had conferences, we had students come in the afternoon and take a practice ACT exam. And then when we have a conference day, I believe it's in March, we will have, it's a half a day of school, so students will come to school for half day, and then in the afternoon, they have the ability to stay here and take a practice SAT. And then in addition to that, students in the 10th grade, if you have a 10th grader, they took the PSAT and MSQT, then in April of this year, they will have the ability to take what's called a pre-ACT. So the pre-ACT is the actual practice test for the ACT. So it's simulated exactly to be like an actual ACT. You will get what's called a predicted score range. So based on your pre-ACT score, this is what they predict how you would do on the ACT. It also gives you benchmarks based on your PSAT scores. Here's how you did on these different benchmarks. Your ACT, pre-ACT scores, how you did on the different benchmarks. It's really helpful information that we can share with faculty as well. I know that was something that Mr. Perlette looked at, particularly because we did offer an ACT workshop, and he and Ms. Wilson offered an ACT workshop, and we looked at those scores to identify students who we thought would benefit from taking the ACT summer workshop. So this is something, if you're a 10th grader, just to be aware of. You'll get more information later this year about that test, but we usually offer that last year was in May. We're going to do it in April. It's during the school day, so again, the students don't have to register, so they just come to school and take the pre-ACT in the morning. So with the SAT, and then I'm going to also encourage students, especially if they're going into the junior year, when they get their PSAT scores back. They've had the pre-ACT last year. During the month of January, I'm going to reach out to students and ask them to, sit down with me so we can compare the scores. Because now we have your pre-ACT, we have your junior PSAT, so to compare and then kind of direct what test that they want to choose. Sometimes we have students who will take both. They say, I'm not really sure which one I'm more comfortable with. Maybe I'll do the February ACT and then SAT in March, and then once I see those scores, once I've gone through an actual test administration, let's see which one I'm more comfortable with, and then moving forward after that, then they focus on one test. So the SATs and ACTs are typically offered during the school year, but now both organizations have expanded testing into the summer months. So someone could, normally the test dates for ACT are in February, April, in June, and then for SAT it's March, May, and June. There is now an option to take the ACT in July. Students also can take the SAT in August. So that was something that was offered for the first time last year. So we had students who were seniors who, it was a week and a half after school had started, who did sit for the August SAT, and we had some current seniors who sat for the July SAT, which was offered for the first time. So there are, again, lots of different options. In the fall semester, SAT is normally offered in October, November, December. The ACT is offered in September, October, and December. You may be thinking, well, when should my son or daughter take these exams? Normally we suggest that a student who's going into the junior year, so if someone who's junior now, starting the process in the second semester, we normally recommend that they start with, we have some juniors. Last Saturday there were a bunch of juniors, some juniors, not a large number, but a couple juniors who did sit for testing. But I would say if they didn't take it in December, they should take it for the first time in March of the junior year. Then maybe one more time in the May or June of junior year, and then in the fall they could either take it in August or October of senior year. We do occasionally have some seniors that will take November testing, but I would say for the most part, by October, November, seniors are done with testing. There's one, maybe, I think when I looked at the roster of who was registered for last Saturday, one senior that was, but everybody else was a junior. Then for ACT, normally recommend either February for your start date, then maybe take it one more time in April or June. You could, if not, July is also an option, but then September, October of senior year would normally be the last kind of target date for taking it. Questions about that? Yes?
Doesn't matter how many times you take it.
Okay, great question. So it doesn't, because colleges do, so colleges are pretty flexible in terms of looking at like the highest combined score. And that's the case for most schools. There are occasionally a few schools that will only look at highest score in one sitting, but for the most part, schools do super score. Having said that, there are some schools, and it's typically the more selective schools that will super score, but they want to see all attempts. So if you've taken the SAT 3 times and you have your, and they have his highest combined score is on all 3, they want to see all attempts that you had to get that combined score. That's a great question. Yes?
I just had a question. I'm not familiar with what subject tests are, SAT subject tests.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Okay, so does anyone remember the achievement test? Anyone remember taking an achievement test? Okay, so the SAT subject test or the old achievement test. So they're 1-hour subject-specific tests that are taken on the same day a student takes the SAT. So you actually, if a student is taking subject tests, they can't take the subject test on the SAT on the same day. You can take up to 3 in a day. Subject tests I'm seeing are normally considered for very few schools. So, and again, it's usually going to be the most selective schools that would recommend subject tests. For many years, Carnegie Mellon, a highly selective STEM school in Pittsburgh, required subject tests for certain divisions. So, like at the engineering division, sciences division, like you had to take you had recommended to take a math subject test, a science subject test. But I would say it's a very small cohort of schools that require subject test. If a student does take subject tests, and I normally send out a subject test chart in the second semester in January once we come back from the break, based on, you know, courses that you're taking, and also I highly recommend that students get recommendations and suggestions from their teachers about this as well, but based on certain subjects you're taking. So for example, if you have a 10th grader taking AP World History with Mr. Warden, and they're doing well in the course, it might be suggested that they sit for the subject test in May or June. So so I would say, talk with Mr. Warden, talk with, and then if you're doing well, then register for this, and they feel that you would do well on this test, sit for the subject test. Or someone who's in AP US History might want to consider, if they're doing well and that they feel that they would do well on the exam, because a lot of times they're prepping for the AP exam. So and they take AP exams, and if they take the May SAT subject test, they're around the same time. So I would certainly recommend a student who is thinking about the US History subject test to sit down, talk with their parents, talk with Mr. Mills, and see if this would be something that they would want to pursue. But I will send out a chart which has subject test recommendations based on, you know, what math you're in. If you're doing well, here's the subject test that you might want to think about. For the sciences, for history, for different disciplines, here are subject tests that you could take.
So you,
Yes,
you'll
ma'am.
be taking that in June after?
May or June. So it really depends on the student. Some students, and I saw this was very common in my last school, that when the US History subject test was on the first Friday of APs, I would see a lot of times students sitting for the AP exam was on Friday, and then the next day they were at school taking the subject test, because they're like, well, I'm prepping for the APs already. I'm probably not going to be any better prepared by taking the subject test.
Right, you want to take it when it's fresh in their heads, and not like 8 months later when, you know, now they've moved on to different AP classes, and then.
You can take it then your sophomore year, or whatever, like right after that.
Usually we recommend taking a subject test in the year you're completing the content. So that means, so World History, 10th grade, AP US History, 11th grade. If someone was taking the AP Bio, either in 10th or 11th grade, taking the Bio subject test, AP Chem, taking the Chem subject test in the year that they're completing the curriculum.
And have the student, if you have a student that's interested in the subject test, have them take a practice test, a subject test practice test, because there's a lot of overlap, as Mrs. Simpson said, but there are sometimes a few things, like on the APUSH subject test, there's dates are not on the AP exam, but on the subject test there are dates. So there's some, you know, things that are not overlap that you might want to, you know, either work on, you know, on your own, or work with somebody to help you for those subject tests.
So this is the layout of, the layout of the SAT, ACT. So in terms of the time structure, so an SAT is about 3 hours and 50 minutes, ACT 3.5 hours. The scoring system is different, so the ACT is scored best composite of 36. SAT best out of 1600. So as you may recall, if you had children that attended Oak Hall prior to 16, they took an SAT, which was scoring out of 2400. Sections, 5 sections on each. The essays, optional for both. So some colleges do require the essay component or the writing component. One example would be UC Berkeley. So if you have a child that's looking at UC Berkeley, they are required to take an SAT or ACT with the essay component. There is no science section on the SAT. On the ACT there is. Calculator usage the calculators are allowed on all sections, math section of the ACT. Like on the PSAT, there's 2 calculator sections on the SAT, but one of them you cannot use a calculator, the other you can use a calculator. In terms of math content, there's trigonometry on both, no guessing penalty. And just so you know, I'm gonna send this to you also. Yeah, I am gonna send this to you. Math is about 50% of the total score for SAT. It's about 25% on the ACT. So just, you know, this kind of gives you a layout, and this kind of, if you're, as you're again thinking about which one to take, this kind of gives a nice little layout of the differences between the 2 tests in terms of the time structure, what content, and other areas of the test.
And like the way that so the curriculum is the same, but the way the questions are formatted are very different, in the sense that ACT, the questions are a little bit more straightforward, where SAT, the trick really is to figure out what the question is asking. and then find the answer. So there's a timing difference in that sense, because on the ACT, there's definitely less time per section, since the questions are more straightforward versus the SAT.
So, just, yeah, and again, when I, as I said before, I'm happy to sit down with students to help them kind of decipher what test. If they feel they need to start by taking both initially, that's fine, but once they kind of determine what path to go in, I wouldn't recommend taking an SAT and ACT course at the same time, because for number one, that's time consuming, because in addition to all the things that they're doing, because most likely students are taking a full course load and no call. So just in terms of time, I would say if you're going to focus on one test at a time, make that, if ACT is the test you're going to focus on, focus your preparations on the SAT versus trying to prep for two tests. So predicted scores, so the scoring scale on the PSAT and the PSAT 8-9 is different from the SAT, but the concordance actually has changed. So when you get your, I believe next week when the students get their score report, there will be a revised, because the concordance chart for SAT to ACT did change over the summer, so I believe they will also provide a link to the new concordance chart as well. So that's something to pay attention to. You know, based on your students' particular SAT, how would they do on the ACT? So I would highly recommend, again, if you, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some sort of link to the concordance, so you can see what these the kind of the equivalencies for these. Questions? Yes. Yeah. So what's going to happen? They're going to log into their account, and they're going to be able to download this.
At school, or we do that at home?
Either one. They can come like next, like let's say they have exams in the morning, and then on Tuesday they come by and say, hey, Ms. Simpson, can you help me with logging in to so they can either do either one. They can come by and see me. We can log in, get this report, and they can bring this home to you, or they can do this at home.
So nothing gets mailed?
No, correct. Mm-hmm.
So, my daughter came home and was talking about the Naviance.
Mm-hmm.
Is the College Board different than that?
It is.
She has been
So, okay, so speaking of Naviance, anyone have ninth grade students in here? Okay. Did they talk to you about what we did last week? Okay. Okay. So Ms. Tucker is going, so later today, mostly likely later today, you're going to get this letter and a little pamphlet from Ms. Tucker and myself. So last week, during the study halls, last Friday, so Ms. Tucker and I went to each freshman study hall, and we did a Naviance orientation with the ninth grade class. So this was to kind of give them orientation. When students come into upper school, they get a Naviance account. So we did an orientation to show them Naviance, the different features, how we use Naviance in terms of managing the college process, how the students can use Naviance to search colleges and learn on research schools. We also did what's called a learning style assessment. So it was about a 20-minute assessment that students completed to assess their learning style. So you will get a letter from me, if not today, definitely by tomorrow, which kind of outlines what we did, and have your students log in. They know. So if they say, well, I don't remember that, we met with them, so in their study hall, so they'll have their Naviance login. We were able to get everyone logged in, have them sit down with you, have them log into their Naviance account, and say, show me your learning styles assessment, because once they completed the learning styles assessment, the results are there. So, and this is something we use even though students are in their underclassmen years, they can start getting familiar with Naviance, because in the junior year, we're going to start using that very closely to help them start researching colleges, to help them to identify schools that they're planning to apply to. Also, a junior or senior can use Naviance to research scholarships You can also, when students are in the senior year, we use Naviance to formally submit their documents to colleges, so any transcripts, recommendations, any school-supported documents, those are submitted through Naviance. So there's a lot of things that they're going to use it for. So we want, the reason why we wanted to meet with the freshmen is to kind of get them familiar with this now, so when they use this later on. So during our meeting, we did ask them, so make sure, like this weekend, sit down with your parents, show them what you did, so, okay, it's okay.
So they should have a different.
Yes, they have a login, and then you have, as parents have login, so it logs into the same account, but it is separate logins.
But then for college board, it's something.
Correct. Yeah, that's a completely different account, correct. We asked them to use their OCall login to access Naviance, so that's how, so they should just use their OCall login to get there. Other questions? Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Christina to talk about kind of within some of the next steps. So what are some things that students can do once they've gotten their PSAT scores, kind of what they can do in terms of getting ready, things that they can do to get ready for actual taking of the SAT, ACT. So go ahead, yeah.
So, backing up just a little bit, so any of the students who took the practice ACT test with me in October, any of the students who took the practice ACT test with me in October, that is a real ACT that ACT administered in the last, say, 18 months. So that is a very good indication. So the good thing is, if you have a sophomore or junior who are interested in starting to take the tests, we can look at the PSAT scores that are coming out next week and those practice ACT scores to kind of get a good idea as to, if there's a test that they're scoring higher on, if they, if they have a timing issue, whatever it might be. The tutors, so we do everything online and live. Revolution Prep has been in business for 16 years. The tutors work full-time for us, so they've been teachers. They have criteria that they have to meet to work for us. They have to score in the top 99% on both SAT and ACT. We retest them every year. And then we do academics, so K through 12 academics as well. So we do prep for subject tests as well as, honors level, standard level, IB, AP classes. When we're doing test prep, we do either small group or private tutoring. In a small group, it's going to be a curriculum. It's 6 to 8 students, and it's going to follow, all the core building skills and the test strategies on either test. They'll have homework each week, and it meets once a week, homework each week, practice exams throughout the program. If you're working privately, the tutor will actually look at like a score report like this, whether it's an SAT or ACT real test score report or a PSAT score report, and they'll analyze that, and that's how they'll know what to focus on with your students. So the difference is, one's more curriculum based, the other is going to be just focused on honing in on your strengths and weaknesses. We do offer PSAT prep, so if you have a student who, who's a sophomore this year, who gets their PSAT scores back next year, and is maybe in that higher index, that might be something to think about, if you are interested in national merit for next year. We offer PSAT classes usually over the summer and into the fall leading up to the PSAT date in October. Any questions? I know, from the students that I work with at OCall, we do a lot of executive function and study skills. So that's definitely something that, we offer in a group atmosphere as well as in a private atmosphere. That seems to be a big thing recently with students. Does anybody have questions?
How do you differentiate yourself from Princeton Review and Kaplan?
The biggest thing is the tutors work full-time for us, so they've gone through hundreds of hours of growth mindset training before they even work with our students. They also meet with their faculty advisors weekly, so it's a full, they're a full-time professional in the sense that they are doing a lot of professional development as they are working with us. The other side of it is the 99th percentile for SAT or ACT. That's a criteria that they need to meet to even work with us. And then the academics. So, you know, you can have a student who works with a tutor who needs help with, say, AP Chem, but also needs to do SAT work. They can work with that same tutor for both.
The other thing I will say, and I'm saying this from the perspective, you know, of having been a partner school at Revolution, my last school, and here, is that when you look at a lot of Revolution's partner schools, a lot of them tend to be independent schools, so that's they know the independent school market really well. They know kind of independent school families, kind of what, you know, the certainly demands that students have, and then they work with the schools based on, you know, the particular schools. You know, like my last school, we didn't, we offered in person classes, but they were very willing to be flexible. Like some programs, it has to be a set time. You have to meet during this time to this time. But we had students who were playing sports, so
right.
like they couldn't make up the first time. So they were fortunate. Revolution was able to offer 2 different times, so kids could choose. Like, you know, so if they had a later practice, they could go to test prep between 4 to 5:30, and then go to like a 5:30 to 7 p.m. practice.
Because everything is live and it's online, we tutor 7 days a week. So it's, the flexibility is a big thing. The group classes are offered almost daily, as well as the privates. You can choose your time, you know, Monday through Sunday. The other thing I would say is we work closely with the counselors at the schools. So it's not like we're trying to step on Mrs. Simpson's toes or vice, you know, if there's a question that you have, I'm either going to advise you to ask Mrs. Simpson because that's her expertise, or I'm going to reach out to Mrs. Simpson and ask her, and then, you know, and then get back with you. So we definitely work very closely with the schools, and I think that's a good thing because of, you know, the success rates that we have. A lot of it is based on the fact that I am familiar with OCAL families and students and what the needs are. Does that answer your question?
When do most kids start that kind of program?
It really depends on the student. I have some students who are trying for athletic scholarships who might start a little bit earlier. A lot of students will start, like if you're a sophomore, most sophomores will start the summer before junior year. So like when Mrs. Simpson was saying that she had a handful of juniors who took the test last December, chances are they worked with us either in the fall or in the summer, and that's why they feel prepared to take a December test.
So it's a short period of time that you work with?
No, I mean, I have some students who work for a year. I mean, it really depends on where you're starting off and where you need to get yourself to as well. I have students who start off doing small group, and then they, you know, and then they'll do private, you know, closer to an exam to hone in on, you know, what specifically they need to focus on. So every program is going to be based on your specific student, you know, in that sense, you know, so it's very individualized. But, you know, to answer your question, a lot of sophomores will start in the summer, and then, you know, depending on, like, I have a lot of juniors who started, current juniors who started, you know, in September. They wanted to take the summer off, they started in September, and they've worked towards December and vice versa. I have a handful starting in January towards the March test. But again, the hours really are determined based on your student and where they're starting off and where they need to get themselves as far as scoring.
And do the small groups, do you place them accordingly with the group that's within there?
They're not. So
Okay.
small group is, you know, because we're worldwide, you know, small group, you may have an OCAL student with a Lawrenceville student, you know, but they're not determined. They're determined based on the test, but not determined based on where they're scoring currently. Any other questions?
Is there another question? That you had your hand raised. The other thing I will say in terms of preparation, so once let's say if a student did a Revolution prep course, let's say after the course was done, they still have access to their dashboard.
Right.
So let's say they took a course to get ready for a March SAT, but then and then finished the course, but then they were looking to prep for May and June. They still have access to their platform and resources to get them ready for a later test.
Right. And throughout each of the programs, whether it's small group or private, they're always gonna have homework after each session, practice exams, and then they log into their dashboard and they score their exam. And they're always gonna generate, for any practice exam they take, whether they're currently working with us or not, they are gonna generate one of those 10-page score reports. So then they really do know what their focus, needs to be on, where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are, just by evaluating those reports.
But just to follow up, I think what we're trying to understand, is it a 6-week course, is it a 12-week course?
Yeah, so it depends. We offer, for small group, we offer a 6-week, a 12-week, and an 18-week. That would equal, it's 1 day a week for 2 hours, so that would either equal 12 hours of prep, 24 hours of prep, or 36 hours of prep. And again, a 12-hour prep in a small group, you may see an increase of 50 points. So we base things more on what kind of an increase you're looking for versus, if you only have 6 weeks at this point. Now, if you are a student who needs a 12-week course, but you only have 6 weeks to do it, we do offer 2 times a week for 6 weeks. We do offer a fast-tracked course if need be.
So I just want, so testing, kind of what we're talking about, the testing timeline. So again, we're going to send this presentation, but this is kind of, again, depending on where a student is, sophomore, junior, or senior. So a sophomore, as we said, the sophomores will sit for the pre-ACT in April in 2019. And then again, sophomores, if they feel that they're ready to engage in a test prep course, they can start during the summer. In the past 2 summers, we've sent out a summer mailing to Old Call families about course options. So I think we sent one out at the end of last school year, and then we sent another one out. So if students wanted to start a program in the summer, they could do that. And then junior, if you have a junior, like as I said, there were a few juniors who tested last Saturday, but I would say the bulk of them will start with the March SAT and then or February ACT, and then whatever test that they decide to focus on, they will focus on for the rest of the junior year into senior year. And then seniors, again, I would say most seniors take their testing between the months of August and November, and then really post-November, there's not really any of them that will sit for testing because by then they either applied to college or they've gotten the score that they're happy with, and so they don't feel the need to do any more testing. And so this is kind of planning, subject tests. So if you have students that are thinking about subject tests, I normally suggest that they look at a May-June timeframe. So if a student is in an AP course that has a corresponding subject test, I know May is a tough month because it's AP exams. There's I know final exams are earlier this year, so they won't have final exams in May, but still the end of April is going to be final exams. There's other things going on, so depending on, and then June might be tough because I know June is a very popular vacation time. So if you have plans in June, but just I would say look ahead to the calendar. So if you're thinking about the subject test, look at kind of where those dates are falling, and the student should decide what date will work better for them.
I feel like lately a lot of families determine their SAT or ACT dates even based on sports. So if you have a student who, is heavy in a spring sport, maybe then you are doing your prep or your whatever preparation that you're doing in the fall, and then vice versa, if you have a football player and so forth.
I was just going to ask, the subject test, do those automatically get submitted to the university, or is it kind of no harm, no foul? If you do well, you submit it. If you don't, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so they're only submitted if the student requests them.
And is it tagged anywhere on when the College Board sends your SATs that the person took them?
So, great question. So when a student gets ready to send their scores to a college, they can either choose all scores submitted or select scores. So if they opt to deselect the subject test, they wouldn't be submitted. You have to formally select that those scores be submitted to the school.
But does the school see that you didn't submit all, that you deselected? Like, is there any negative that you selected individual ones?
No, they don't. So unless you send a score to the school, they don't see it. But I will say this: let's say if you apply to a school, and again, this is going to be a very small percentage, but let's say a school that like an Ivy League school that would require all tests that you've taken, then you would need to submit it, but unless you formally select, yes, I'm sending my scores, they're not submitted to a school. And just in terms of going back to the timing, I know, and since we have our athletic director here, I could help him, he can help confirm this. Like, is May, in the early, that first weekend of May, is that usually an end time for sports, or is that?
It's state series time.
Okay,
for,
so.
yeah, and this year the schedules got pushed, so like baseball ends a week later.
Okay,
things
so,
like that.
okay, so if you have a kid in sports and they may, if depending on how they do, then maybe June might be a better option.
This
Yeah.
is why they call me the tail that wags the dog. Can I mention the summer stuff we do? Is that appropriate?
Yes, yes.
So Oak Hall also, if you didn't know, I run the summer camps as well, but a couple of our teachers do SAT prep and ACT prep over the summer. So like Mr. Campbell does the English side of SAT, Mr. Marjoram math side of SAT, and then last year we actually did it for free last year. Can't promise that this year, but maybe. But Miss Wilson and Mr. Perlette do the ACT prep. So usually we roll that out in kind of June. We do one a week. We do it in the afternoon since a lot of the kids have sport camps and things in the morning. But you can look for that as an option as well. And our summer schedule comes out usually about February 1st or February 15th.
Questions? So I know we're a few more minutes, but we wanted to use this kind of time to answer any questions that you had.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Do you recommend that all students take the essay on your tests?
Okay, great question.
I have parents ask me that all the time. That's
Okay.
why I'm asking.
So here's what I'll say about the essay. I would say more schools don't require it, but you will. Like I can tell you, we had last Friday was the University of California deadline, and we had some seniors that had not taken SAT prior with an essay that had to sit for the SAT on Saturday because the California and the UC Berkeley rep did come to us this week, and they were very clear. Please, your students need to know that we will not accept any SATs that are without essay. So there are going to be certain schools. So I would recommend that when you're looking, whenever it is, when you start searching colleges, if there are schools that require it. I mean, if you take it with essay, one with essay, great. So you know that if you come across a school that will require it, like at UC Berkeley, that you're set. But so just so you know that you have it in the bank. And then if you decide to take future tests without essay, then you're okay. But just know that you may encounter schools that require it. So just I would rather students be in a position where they're not having to scramble to say, oops, I gotta sign up for a test, but in order to meet the requirements of this particular college university.
So along those lines, like, so would you do the ACT written as well?
Okay.
Or would it be?
Yeah, again, I would say depending on the schools that you're applying for.
And then would it be like a super score type thing where they would just see just the essay?
Okay,
or they
so
would say,
super scoring is going to be very specific. Some schools, like the University of Florida, for example, does not super score. They will only look at your composite score on a test. They will not look at your sub-score in science, sub-score in writing.
On the ACT.
On the ACT. Other schools will do ACT super scores. They will combine sub-scores. So I would say that in terms of the essay, there's not, like, I'm just thinking, besides the California UC Berkeley, there's not another school that's sticking out that requires the essay. But again, I would say pay close attention when you're looking at your schools, looking at their testing requirements to see what they require. Most of the schools that I see that Oak Hall students apply to typically don't have that stipulation, but yeah, Berkeley kind of stood out as one because they just recently visited us and they were saying, if you have students applying here, make sure that they've taken an SAT with an essay or ACT with an essay.
It seems as if with the super scoring, SAT is pretty universal, where ACT specific schools don't accept super scores. You just want to be mindful of that.
Yes.
Is there, I was afraid to ask this, from a scoring, how good can you predict, what it's going to take to get into this school, that school?
Okay.
How do you figure that out just based on last year or whatever?
Okay, so every school, and and this is kind of just a range, but every school publishes what's called an incoming class profile. So the incoming class profile at a college tells you for the class that just started, so the class that enrolled in fall of 18, here were their credentials. Here was the average, the school ranked in class. Here was the average ranking class for the students who enrolled. Here was the middle 50 test ranges. Here was how they scored in the middle 50 on SAT, the middle 50 on ACT. If it's GPA, law schools don't calculate a GPA requirement because GPAs are not universal between high schools. But if they report an average GPA for accepted students, I know that's on UF's incoming class profile. They will report like average or middle 50% GPA. So that gives you last year, the most recent data. Obviously, every admission cycle is different. The thing that you can't account for, let's say if UF has a great application year and they go up 10% or so in applications, then that kind of that changes things. But I would recommend looking at the incoming class profile for the most selective schools. So if you were to put colleges in the U.S. on a selectivity tier, kind of the top of that selectivity tier would be the Ivies, Stanford, MIT, I'd throw Georgetown in there, Duke, Northwestern, Caltech. So, but I would say for those schools, typically the students who apply to those schools have, very high testing. I would say testing somewhere on the SAT, high 1500s and higher. For the ACT, 34 and higher, 33, 34 and higher on the ACT. The middle 50s is something to pay attention to. What's in terms of the middle 50 range. What the middle 50 range means is that 25% of the students who got admitted were below that range, 25% were above that range. So this just kind of gives you a little in terms of the middle 50 for a cohort of schools. I would say for using UF and FSU as in context. For UF, I would say that, and keep in mind, UF does have different admit options. So someone could be admitted for fall, someone could be admitted for summer, someone could be admitted for January if they are in the Innovation Academy. But based on what I've seen from OCAL students who applied, I would say the middle 50 for SAT, somewhere going to be in the 1300, 1400 range for UF, and then equivalent on the ACT, 29, 30, 31, 32 on the ACT. Questions?
Is this presentation available on?
Yes, we're gonna put it, we're gonna email it to you, and then we're gonna put it on our website. Yes?
So kind of the point of the PSAT is a bit lost on me, and so, why take the PSAT instead of just study for the SAT?
Okay, great question. Okay. The PSAT is, it's meant to be an actual practice for the SAT, because the reason why we have students take the PSAT with 8 and 9 beginning in 8th and 9th grade, and then the PSAT and SQT is to get them familiar with the content and structure of the actual SAT. So number one, the students can see the content, get the structure and content familiarity by taking a PSAT. Number two, they can also look at where they are scoring on the different sections in terms of their performance, and also get suggestions on how to improve for when they take an actual SAT. The other area that this helps with, this is something we haven't used, I don't think we've used a lot at OCAL, but something that's a tool to use is that the PSAT also has a tool called AP Potential. So it's based on how you did on the PSAT scores, and the students can see this when they log into their College Board account. Based on your PSATs, it gives you, okay, you have a roster of AP Potential, meaning these are based on how you did on the PSAT, these are AP courses that potentially you could do well in, based on how you did on the PSAT.
I have a 9th grader, so as a parent perspective, because I feel like I know too much on either end, I think they very rarely sit down for a 3.5-hour test. So it's kind of the practicing test endurance, test fluency, like she said, getting used to the format, but also getting used to sitting and taking a 3.5-hour test, because very few times in school do they take that type of a test. So any practice that they can do in that sense, like any practice exams that are offered and so forth, is gonna be beneficial since they, since it's just teaching them how to take a test. Like where when you're doing athletics and you're working on your endurance in your sport, it's similar to that.
Is it scaled so the questions are easier because they're only sophomores instead of juniors? Like, I don't know why not just taking an SAT your sophomore year would be more impactful.
So with the essay, the reason why we recommend students take, like, even the ACT as well, content-wise in terms of like the ACT, that the pre-ACT that students take is specifically meant for a 10th grade student. So if someone in 8th grade took this, there's content in the high school curriculum that they would not have covered that they would when they took a pre-ACT they wouldn't have any familiarity with. So, and it's kind of the same thing with the PSATs. I had a fifth grade parent come to me and ask, well, can my kids sit for the PSAT 9? And I said, well, they haven't had the content, the content preparation that, even though they'd be doing well, but there's content preparation that they have not had that they will not be prepared for if they take the PSAT 9.
So the PSAT is content driven towards a 10th grader, whereas the SAT is
The
content
PSAT 8-9 is aligned with for 8th and 9th graders, and then the PSAT and MSQT is 10th, 11th grade, and then the pre-ACT is content aligned for a 10th grader.
And the SAT is content aligned
Like it's for someone who's planning to apply to college and normally taking in 11th and 12th grade. Yes.
So you mentioned about sixth graders. What if we got something that's supposed to sign up for an ACT?
The Duke tip.
That is the Duke tip, yes. Okay, yes, the Duke tip. So here's, and I'll just say this, I'm not a huge fan of Duke tip. I mean, it's nice that the kids have the option, but again, the Duke tip, yes, you could take the SAT, but, and the colleges would see, because I would say, anytime you take an SAT, it's on your record. I mean, they would see that you took testing like earlier than normal, but again, I would say in terms of content preparation, you're not like we talked about the math content that's on the PSAT 9. Someone who's in the 5th or 6th grade may not have cut, I'm not sure what math they're teaching, but most likely they haven't had algebra by then, so which is the algebra,
Or geometry.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have the math in terms of taking the 2 math sections. They wouldn't have had those math content.
Even the vocabulary.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that, I have a 4th grader who I opted to not do the Duke tip test because, again, like if you're looking at one of these tests, I just can't imagine that he would be able to do that material.
But I'll take the contrary view. My kid did it, and I thought it was great because, like you said, to set the mindset,
Right.
you're taking a 3.5-hour test, and if your kid qualified and they feel special by that qualification, I don't know why you wouldn't give them a chance.
And that's the pro to it, exactly.
I mean, just to have
I
the
think
opportunity.
based on your child, like my
Yeah, and there's
child, that
also
would be
John
very.
Hopkins, right?
The
Right.
CTL,
Exactly.
yeah, and I've had former students who've done tip. I had more students at my last school who did the Johns Hopkins CTL. Yeah.
It's in Northern. Yeah.
So we're going to be around for a while, so please feel free to come up to us, ask questions. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Please be in touch if you have questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.